So, anyways, as we get started with Mike and Marilyn, the kind of structure that we talked about, or the kind of way that we were going to have this conversation is, Mike is going to give us a little bit of information on what PADS is, what PADS looks like, what his duties as site director are, and again, anywhere he feels like there's any kind of like important things that he wants to say that are just helpful for anybody to know about PADS, or that he just feels called to share about what it means to live your faith, then he'll go there. But we'll have some time for questions, and then Marilyn will do kind of the same thing. Like Marilyn said, Marilyn has some expertise and experience serving in PADS, and is also at a point where she's been thinking about why it is she's been doing PADS. And you'll find that when you do things for a number of years, whether it's, relative to you, whether that's 2 years or whether it's 55 years, you start to think about why it is you continue to do it, right? And so you get something out of it, or you get something out of it different every year. And but at the same time, you're asking that question, and that really is the important part. So Marilyn's got I've heard Marilyn tell some great stories about PADS and why it is she does PADS, and the things that PADS have given back to her over the years. And so we're really blessed to have both of them here to share some of their wisdom with us. And so we'll get started and see what Mike's got to say about what PADS is.
Okay, so I'll start. I'm going to leave all the wisdom stuff to Marilyn, because I'm sure she's got a lot I do.
You're making me feel really
That's okay.
Here,
I know.
guys.
You'll get there. Yeah, it'll come out. I know it will.
So just so that I'll give a brief outline, and I'll talk about what PADS has been historically, and then, I think all of you know that the world's been a little different for the last 6 months, so we can talk about what PADS has been like in the last 6 months. So St. Mark's has been involved with PADS for at least 30 years. I know there's a plaque hanging on the wall in the center that talks about how long this mission has been part of St. Mark's ministry to the community, and St. Mark's involvement in preparation for the community. And I'm always impressed by that, because what PADS typically is at St. Mark's is beginning the first week in October and running through the last week in April. So pretty much all of the colder times of the year. St. Mark's hosts a group of people who are homeless for one reason or another. And there's lots of different reasons why people might be homeless in our society, and almost all of them, involve very complex situations in their lives. And, but typically on a Monday night, about 60 homeless people will gather at St. Mark's at about 7 o'clock at night. And so we welcome them to the center. We help them check in. We provide dinner for them, and that's, a very important part of the ministry is providing, a warm meal and providing shelter for the night. People have access to showers. We have access to toiletries to provide them in case they don't need them. In some cases, we even can help them with some emergency clothing supplies. But then they stay the night. The word PADS is an acronym for Public Action to Deliver Shelter. So there's actually a nationwide organization in this area. It's sponsored under a charity called Journeys, which is based in Palatine. But so that's that acronym, but it's also literally what people sleep on. So in one of the closets at the center at St. Mark, there are about 70 pads where, once somebody comes to the center, they take one of these things that looks just like a mattress and they lay it on the gym floor, or in the case of families, they lay it in the family center or in the gathering room at St. Mark's, or in the case of some of the women, they'll go down into the basement. But they literally sleep on the floor, and then they're sheltered from the cold of the winter night, and without this ministry, many of them would be either sleeping in their cars or sleeping in the cold, or having to use the little bit of money they have to gather and go into a hotel room. So it really makes a big difference in their lives. And then in the morning, they're provided with a continental type breakfast, and they're provided with a sack lunch, and then they leave. And St. Mark's is one of a network of churches. I think there's 17 or 18 churches in the area where they serve to provide this type of shelter each night of the week. So in a normal year, people will go from St. Mark's on a Monday night, and I don't remember some of the other sites, but I know like St. Alphonsus Church in Prospect Heights is a Saturday night site, and Willow Creek out in Barrington is a Thursday night site. So people will go from the one site to the other, and that's their way of gathering shelter. So, for me, it's just a way of, Jesus talked about loving your neighbor, and Jesus talked about providing for those that are less fortunate than you. I'm not an expert on chapter and verse within the Bible, but they talk about, providing clothing to the naked and providing shelter to those who are homeless and providing food to those who, and it's just a way of serving man. The other thing that I've always admired about PADS, to me, it's a great, wonderful example of how, without trying to do something tremendous and something earth-shattering, you can serve your fellow man. So in a typical year at PADS, there's about 75 to 80 people who are somehow involved in providing support to the homeless. So it's all a volunteer basis. Some people will come in and help staff the shelter from 7 o'clock at night till 11 o'clock at night. Other people come in at 11 o'clock at night and help support the site during the night, and they make sandwiches for the following day's lunch. And then there's other crews that do nothing but help clean up the site in the morning. One of the gentlemen, I apologize, I don't remember his name, but one of the great volunteers at St. Mark used to come in one Tuesday morning every month and help pick the pads up off the floor and wipe them down to sanitize them and then put them in the closet. And the thing that I always admired about it is he was 91 years old, so it's a great example of, but one of the things I always admire about PADS is it's how an example of, you don't necessarily need to think about how can I completely change the world in a big way. You can think about how do I provide some service in a small way that makes a difference to people. So another example, I'll give my wife credit for this one. There was a gentleman at PADS a year ago who told me during the day that he was going for a job interview the following morning. So you can imagine to somebody in this situation that a job interview is a big thing. And he said, can I hang up my suit coat in the office? Because he didn't want to have to leave it by his bed in the gym. So I hung it up, and then I noticed that there was a couple buttons missing, and and it needed to be ironed. So called my wife, and she came over and sewed the buttons on and helped iron it. And he got the job the next day. So it was a few minutes of service for my wife, but it made a difference in somebody's life. So that's what I take away from PADS is how can you spend a few minutes or a few hours of your life periodically and make a difference to somebody.
Oh, that's great, Mike. I don't know about leaving all the wisdom to Marilyn there. Because, I feel like that's, when Mike is talking about Claire and Ryan, I hope, I say for me, I hope you guys heard it, but for me, what was really important and what Mike was saying was that, there's something for everybody to do at PADS, and it's a small thing. And Mike said, yeah, maybe it's not going to change the world, but in some sense, it does. It's really changing. It changed one person's life, and a job is not going to fix everything, but again, oftentimes we see big problems in life, big things, societal issues, and we'll say, I can't do anything about that. Sure you can. You can sew some buttons on a coat and iron it, and that could make a huge difference. And in a lot of ways, just doing those little things can be. Sometimes it doesn't make you feel like you did something big, but sometimes we get a gift and find out later on that those little things made a big difference. So thanks for that, Mike. And also I say, maybe we'll just linger here for a second. Ryan and Claire, do you have any questions about the specifics of how PADS comes off in this regular way?
We didn't talk about what's happened recently.
Yeah.
We'll get there, I think so.
Yeah. Right. So as Mike was talking too, I kind of heard, and maybe Marilyn will add a little on this one too, but hospitality is a big part of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
While it is shelter, right? I know the volunteers that serve the food are really about hospitality and you know, want to greet the guests, and that's the language that they use. These are our guests. And then it's part of a larger thing, right? So Journeys has social work connections, and social workers then um, work with the guests on these larger things, you know, as their life kind of
Yeah, that's an important part. So
Yeah.
the churches provide the shelter during the day, but then there's a facility called Journeys. If you read the sign, you'll see it if you ever go down Northwest Highway into Palatine. It's called Journeys, the Road Home.
Yeah.
And as Dave said, that's a facility where people go during the day and they get the help that they need, you know, to move forward with their lives. And obviously, in many cases, that is shelter, right? So all of you can envision how different your life is be if you don't have a regular place to lay your head every night, if you don't have a regular place to sit down for a meal every day. So Journeys helps people get shelter. And many times there's an underlying issue that could be employment. There are many of the people who are involved with PADS have a mental health challenge or have an addiction challenge, and Journeys helps provide the social support to support that. So I think that's another way of looking at what PADS does, is it provides people the stability during the day or during the night and the food in their stomach so that they can work during the day to address their issues and move forward. And, you know, we had a family at St. Mark's this past year that I think was 5 children from 2 different generations and the mom. So it was a mom, and if I remember right, it was her two of her children and 3 of her grandchildren.
Grandchildren, yeah.
And you know, they would come and actually, I think you talk about providing the hospitality. I remember volunteers who would sit with one of the little girls and help her do her homework at night and everything. And, you know, those types of things. But ultimately that family late in this year got placed in permanent shelter. So that was, I think, a great example of where it can really make a difference, you know, because that family with 5 kids, you know, is now in a permanent place and is in a much better place as a result.
You know, could I add something there just to think about, you know, the PAD sites provide the shelter and the meals. But think about this, if you were homeless, the guests don't have a place to get mail. They don't have a place to store their things. They don't have an address. Some of them don't have internet, whatever. They can go to Journeys. Journeys has counseling services for them. They do have a clothing pantry. They actually have a food pantry too, but I don't know how much they use that. But they have mailboxes out there. They have doctors come in occasionally, nurses come in and provide care, dentists come in and provide care periodically. So it's a whole, when you're homeless, you don't think of all those things. Gosh, I can't even get any mail. Where am I going to get my mail? Or where am I going to get a pair of shoes? And they have a quite a big clothing facility out there too. So it isn't just the food and the overnight, it's all the things that we so much take for granted in our lives. They're just there all the time, and it isn't there for our guests. So Journeys provides a lot of that also.
Yeah, Marilyn, I appreciate you saying that, because it reminds me, or I feel like I heard somebody say, you know, one of the most expensive things in life is to be poor, because you don't have a place to store your food.
Right.
You've gotta constantly buy things that are not great for you but are ready, and you know, you don't have a place to cook. You got to buy cars that need constant attention. You got to take them places where people are going to fleece you. You know, it just there's just like this certain threshold where maybe not just having a job is gonna solve all your problems.
Well, if you go to look for a job, even you don't have a mailing address
Yeah.
to give out. So I mean, it's some of the things that we just, you know, when I really sit and think about it, we just don't even think about those things because we take them for granted that it's always going to be there for us, and it just isn't for them. You know, and I'm kind of going ahead of what we were
No,
going to
go
say,
ahead.
but one night at well, two instances. Now I've been doing PADs for lots of years, but I used to work over at Leaning Tower YMCA in Niles, and they had a hotel there, a 200-room hotel, and a lot of the people were alone, and they were older, and they didn't have families and whatever. And they could be transient, which meant they could stay there by the night, or they could be permanent and stay there forever. And when I started doing PADs, after a couple of weeks, couple of nights at PADs, a family that lived in the hotel would come in to PADs. And I, you know, kind of wondered what was going on with that because they were at the hotel too. Well, it turns out they would get a check for, I don't know what kind of relief they were on or whatever, what kind of a check they were getting, but it would only support them in the hotel for maybe 2 weeks out of the month. And the other time they were out on the street. So they would come to PADs, and they would come out here to our PAD site. And then one other night I was there and I saw this guy come in and I thought, he looks so familiar. Well, it turns out he went to high school with my two sons, and he was now homeless and on the street. So it can happen to anyone. It's just, what is it we always say? You're one or two emergencies or things falling apart in your life, and you could be out there on the street too. It's not always a huge thing that happens to you. So it's, yeah. That is one of the reasons also that one of the rules is that you probably need to be in high school to come and help serve at PADS. We can work around that at times, or you can do things where the guests aren't there. But sometimes it is because we get families, and the kids in those families are kids that you go to school with. And boy, isn't that a sad one when we see that happen. So anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's good. That's good. Thank you. And so then that, you know, that adds some layers, right? So Marilyn's talking about then, you know, when we talk about hospitality, guest privacy is that's another thing that comes up when we think about PADs. And so then also, you know, something that Marilyn said that connected with something that Mike said earlier is this is a complicated situation. You know, it's not just that somebody chose not to go to work, or they got fired, or, you know, oftentimes people experiencing homelessness are doing so because of a domino effect of things that have been missing in their life, generational trauma, societal problems, things that aren't necessarily in their control. And so I think it's good. It's just good to know that these definitely are people who are humans, who have, you know, who are doing the best they can, but it's complicated for them.
It is.
And the solution has to be slow, unfortunately. So yeah, let's see. Mike, you want to talk a little bit about how PADS works during the pandemic?
Sure. So as you can imagine, and one of the things about PADS is many of the volunteers at PADS are older. So I think you've, at this point, 7 months into it, you've heard enough about the pandemic to know that people who are older or people who have some chronic disease are more vulnerable to the virus, as well as it might have more effect on their lives. So many of the volunteers who work at PADS are older, and certainly just the rules that we all live by with social distancing and everything like that is not compatible with 45 people laying on the gym floor at St. Mark's on a Monday night. So we were actually one of the last PAD sites to close. I think we may have been the very last night, but I think it was, we probably hung on a week or two longer than Marilyn and Moira would have wanted us to. I think it was the last, I think it was Monday the 24th was the last night that we hosted.
So, yeah.
So, but it was 24th of March. But fortunately, Journeys was able to get some government grants and some other grants So most of the guests that we typically would support and that the other churches would support during the week are now sheltered at 2 hotels in Arlington Heights. So they stay there. They're typically 2 people in a room. So Journey's got the money to keep them in the hotels, but didn't get the money to feed them. So we have been working the last 6 months again as part of that network of churches to provide meals to the homeless. So typically once a week, lately it's been Sundays, before it was Monday, there'd be a group of people at the center in St. Mark's, and they pack up a bag of breakfast ingredients, maybe cereal or yogurt and, a muffin and a piece of fruit and some juice, and then also a lunch, a sandwich and some chips and some fruit and a bottle of water. And we prepare those 2 meals, and then we typically do that for about 40 to 50 guests in any given week, and assemble those, and then they get delivered to the hotels, and they're actually delivered to the doors of the hotels. And there's, as you can imagine, in the time of the pandemic, there's all kinds of protocols about that, trying to keep both the volunteers and the guests safe. And then typically one night a week, we have been providing dinner again to somewhere in the range of 35 to 40 people. For the most part, we've actually been partnering with local restaurants. Mrs. P and Me, that's right near St. Mark's, has provided, I think, well over 1,000 meals as part of the program. But there's wonderful stories that surround that. I remember Marilyn and Moira and I were at the beginning, we're really trying to figure out how we were going to make this work. So, but I went into Mrs. P and I said, I have about $900. Can you help us out with some meals? And I negotiated a price, and they were going to provide some meals to us. But the next day, the manager or owner, I'm never sure which Chris is, of the restaurant called me and said, hey, we have a frequent patron of our restaurant, or somebody who really likes our restaurant, and she has started a Facebook site, trying to raise money for this effort. So it was called Feed the 56, and it's related to the fact that the zip code for Mount Prospect ends in 56. So she went out and tried to solicit her money from her friends, and she phrased it really nicely. It was, hey, I want to support this local faith community. I want to support a business in the community that I live in and that I enjoy, and I want to support the homeless. So she had 3 missions in what she was seeking to do. So she, just through that simple act of creating that Facebook site, or the Facebook fundraising site, raised $3,000, and we provided over 300 meals as a result of that. So, it was another example of, it's something that I never thought of doing. And of course, it's probably because I don't have the social media awareness that either Ryan or Chris or Claire does. But, she found a way to contribute and to find a way to have one act serve 3 different purposes in her life. So I'll always remember her story.
Yeah, that's a great story. It really is. She was going to she wanted 56 people to donate $10 a piece, $560, thinking that would be 1 or 2 maybe dinners. And in 2 days, she raised over $3,000. It was incredible. Yeah.
So what we're just about to transition into now, because we're starting up again where it's getting to be October, so we're going to go back to the traditional PAD. So again, we won't be providing shelter at least till there's a better treatment or a vaccine, till we get through the next phase. But we are going to have people coming on Monday nights, and they're going to be preparing dinners. So we will continue delivering probably 45 dinners a week to the hotels. What's going to change a little bit is, instead of doing individual breakfast and lunches, we're going to be preparing boxes that will be designed to provide 2 people who share a hotel room with their breakfast and lunch food ingredients for a week. So we're at this point aspiring to prepare 5 boxes, which would then provide 10 people with their breakfasts and lunches for a week. So we're about to hear an awful lot about it. I was just talking to Pastor Christie yesterday. start appearing in all the newsletters that come out from St. Mark's about donating the ingredients for these food boxes. So, you know, it's just a small community like St. Mark's is going to find a way to provide probably in the range of 175 to 200 meals a week to these people who need our support. So.
Yeah, so I feel like that's been kind of like an underlying theme throughout the whole thing, coming up with these creative solutions, and then kind of getting the partners in place and people sharing their small talents, whatever it is, and it makes a difference.
And so one thing I didn't mention, Marilyn, I think mentioned it early, maybe before
thank you.
Ryan came on. We also partner with another faith community. So there's a gentleman named Ben. I know that's not his real name. His real name is Mohammed something, but Ben's a very inspiring guy, and he has a friend named Hakan, and they're of Turkish descent, and they're of Muslim faith, and they have partnered with St. Mark in delivering this mission. So almost every one of these meals, somebody, and Journeys has wanted to be somebody under 50, so that leaves me out, has to deliver those, although I've done it a few times. Somebody who has to deliver these meals to the hotel. And Ben and Hakan, you know, from their community and from their sense of giving back to the world and contributing to the world, typically pick up the meals at St. Mark's and deliver them to the hotel and literally go door to door and deliver the package to the front door of these guest hotel rooms. So, and I know Hakan's done it a few times in the pouring rain.
Oh boy.
So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Claire and Ryan both have been to the Turkish American Society of Chicago, and know a few of the people there. Yeah, and so St. Mark has had a kind of informal relationship with members of that community for 10 years, kind of very under the radar, kind of low key. And in the last 2 or 3 years, there's been an influx in the community, because of the hostility that's happening in Turkey. The members of this group, so the members of the Turkish American Society of Chicago tend to be kind of part of a faith movement in Turkey that values interfaith dialogue, education, and peace. And their movement has had a falling out with the government. They have been scapegoated by the government there. And so many of them and their families are really not safe to ever really return to Turkey. And their family members who live there are you know, they have to be very quiet about their connection to these faith members. And so many of them have changed their names. So it is that it's more difficult to find them. And so we've had this kind of informal relationship with a lot of these folks, because they love this community. They love Mount Prospect. They love the ideas of religious freedom. They love the idea that that Mount Prospect is a place, right? The motto is has to do with friendliness, and for them that's huge. That's a life-changing value for them. And so we just always kind of, and they would say, you know, if you ever need anything, let us know. And a couple of times we've asked, and it you know, it's just such a gift to be able to work with them.
And both Ben and Hakan kind of have this quiet service approach, and that's what I appreciate about both of them. They both would take an approach of saying, what I do is no big deal, and I wish I could do more. And if you ever, any occasion where I've had to thank Ben or Hakan for the work that they do, their reaction has always been, you know, I wish I could do more. I'm only doing a little bit, you know. And I think that's my theme for the day, is the little bit matters. So.
Yeah, very much. Yeah. All right. So Ryan and Claire, any questions about PADS and the way that it's happening now, and kind of the way that it's kind of doing new things right now? Okay, so then we'll make space for Marilyn to kind of talk about what PADS has meant for her and her ministry at St. Mark, and why she's done it for the years she's done it.
Well, I've been at St. Mark for a long time. When PADS first started there about 30 years ago, my aunt was one of the first people involved with the PADS program, and she started with the food.
That's cool.
And so she kind of got me involved then later on when I had a little more time to do it. And I don't know, I grew up Lutheran. It was always kind of in our family that we were very fortunate, not that we were rich or whatever, but we always had a house, we had food, we had cars, whatever. You know, and you're fortunate, you should give something back. You should work toward helping somebody do something. And this was one of the things that I just absolutely fell in love with when it started at St. Mark. And again, it's not something that takes a lot of your time. It took a little more of mine when you get to be the site director or the food coordinator. Yeah, it takes a little more. But for the most part, you can spend 1 hour every other week doing something for PADS, and you're doing your share. So anyway, we've just always felt that it's important to give something back for everything, just to say thank you to God for giving you what you have. And like I say, PADS was kind of my thing. Also, Lucille, which is part of Holy Family School, it's a fundraising resale place for them. That's another thing that's near and dear to my heart. So those two things. But PADS is not only St. Mark, and Mike talked about the Ben's Church and whatever, but our PADS site started with about 20 people. And we have grown to between 60 and 65 people every Monday night. We can't take any more just because we don't have the room for it. We're one of the biggest sites. So it takes, when we shop, it takes to feed 65 people, it takes 12 loaves of bread, 4 pounds of lunch meat, 4 pounds of cheese, 6 gallons of milk, 6 gallons of orange juice, 4 meatloaves, 4 hams. I mean, it's a lot of food. Many other churches in the area, all different denominations, help us out. We have the site because we have the center for the people to sleep. But we have 5 different churches that supply the meals on the Mondays in the month. So there's 4 Mondays every month, and then some months have 5. St. Raymond is the Catholic Church, has been very active, and as a matter of fact, Maura, who is now going to do the food, she's from St. Raymond. St. Philip's from Glenview comes in. There's a young moms group from just the Mount Prospect community. They belong to all different churches. They have a Monday night. St. Mark has the 4th Monday of every month. So it's very much a community ministry. People come in to clean, and they're on the shifts, and they set up. Some people come in and set up the linens before the guests get there, and they're from all the different churches in the area. So it isn't only St. Mark, and it's a great thing to see. We ask people for a typical Monday night to bring the food in. We call people. We have a list of about 100 people that we can call who have offered to bring food and to help. So we'll sit down on the week before and call and ask them to bring in. We'll call somebody and say, could you bring in 12 loaves of bread? Could you bring in 30 bananas? Could you bring in 30 yogurts? Could you bring in 30 baked potatoes? You know, whatever we're going to have for the meal. And people come from all over and do that. And everybody always says yes unless they're out of town or something. They all want to help. It's a very small thing that everybody can do. Like Mike said, it's a very small little thing that you can do once a month or more if you want to, but it makes such a huge difference for the guests. And when you get there and you kind of know the guests because they're there all the time. They're the same, not always the same guests, but some of them are. And once in a while you sit down and you talk to them, you eat with them. You can if you want to. And you hear their stories, and some of the stories are just, they're so sad, they're so tragic. And it just makes you thankful that you and your church and your community can do something to help. I don't know. I'm just a big believer that if you live in this country, we should all have to give something back. I have always felt that way. So we're really fortunate. Um, the other churches are great about helping with all the things that we do, the cleanup, the shopping, the donation of all the linens, all the towels, all the supplies that we need. Our site, well, all the sites, I guess, run on donations only. Um, all of the money to feed, house, and buy all the supplies is all donated. We are very, very fortunate. Some of the businesses in the area are great to us. Walmart has been really good with donated money. Costco has been good with donated grant money and also gift cards. Who else? Who is the one I'm trying to think? Oh, Fannie Mae Candy. I mean, I know it sounds funny. They are great. They give us candy, which the guests love for dessert. The bakery sends us bread sometimes. So it is truly a labor of love, and it's truly a labor that most, a lot of people are involved in, and it just makes it all work. Plus, we've met some very nice people from other churches. So it's a way to meet new people and find out what's going on with other churches. We find out we're not so different than the Catholic Church or any of the other ones in the community. We kind of all have the same values and the same goals about helping people in that. So one of the rules is you're not supposed to be there when the guests are there if you're under 16. And that is just partly because of the fact that sometimes there are kids there and you might be with somebody that you go to school with. They might be one of the guests. So we work really hard to try to make that happen. However, some of the scouting groups and the church groups in the area, the kids get together and they bake cookies and they bring them in for the desserts, or they'll bake a pie or whatever. They'll go out and collect if we need towels, because we do furnish showers, which is a lot of the sites don't have that capability. So we have towels there, and we have soap and toiletries. Some of the scout groups raise money and buy the toiletries and that kind of stuff. It's fun. You should, I don't know if you guys have had a tour of it when the center is set up on a regular Monday night, not right now, but have you been over there to see what it looks like when it's set up for? Well, if we ever go back to what we were doing, I'm sure sometime we will go back to, it'll be a new normal, but it will be. Have David get you over there and see it, but when it's set up for the guests to come in. It's amazing how we can feed 60 people in about an hour and a half. Sometimes we have a barber there who does haircuts. What else have we had? I'm trying to think. Well, we have a clothes closet. Ours isn't big because we just don't have the room to store it, but winter coats and boots and things like that. So yeah, I mean, and you guys could, some of the groups do shopping. Some of the scout groups have done grocery shopping for us. So there's a lot of ways that you can serve without actually being there when the guests are there. So,
Related to the clothes closet, if you ever want to appreciate the small things in life, have a pair of wet socks and not have another pair of socks. So they always say that one of the primary things that's needed in homeless shelters is socks. And we give away a lot of socks. So
yes.
we've had people come in.
Undershirts.
We've had people come in soaking wet, and the thing that they most want is a pair of socks. So, I think that's a way to frame the gratefulness for the life you have is, fortunately, most of us on this call have never had to worry about having a roof over our head at night or having access to a pair of dry socks. And, so I think some of the ministry can help you have gratitude for the things that you have.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we take so much for granted in our lives. And when you work with this group for a while, you realize just how fortunate you are. So if you ever want to, I'm not there all the time anymore, but if you ever want to come in and take a tour and look around, by all means, you know, let one of us know, let David know, and we'll meet you there and, you know, show you what goes on a typical Monday night there. So, yeah. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, Marilyn, I'll just say too, just to highlight before we lose it, or get too far away from it. I don't know if we'll lose it, but Marilyn really highlighted, I think one of the reasons why people do this is that there's this kind of this like reciprocal flow of generosity and gratefulness that happens, this gratitude, right? And it doesn't always have to start with feeling grateful, right? It can, and for a lot of people it does. They, you know, they have a sense where they stop and they think, wow, I really am grateful for what I'm going to do. I'm going to help somebody else, right? Or they just serve because they do that. But in that process, there's this kind of reciprocal generosity that kind of keeps moving, right? And when we kind of return to something Mike said earlier about you know, about what God calls us to do, there's a lot we have to be grateful for, and so this reciprocal relationship where we're sharing our gratefulness, guests are sharing their gratefulness, right? God is a part of this sharing, and so we'll talk more about that. But the other thing from what Marilyn said is Marilyn just really expanded this idea that this is a community ministry, right? We couldn't do any of this without about 6 churches, without Walmart, without Mrs. P, right? And so I hope you hear that too, that this is a really and the gift of community in that too, right? It's really cool to meet all these people and to be able to share this ministry and this chance for gratefulness with others.
David, and I
Yeah.
wanted to say that it takes about 35 volunteers every Monday night at St. Mark to have that happen. And that's the people that bring the food, the people that clean up on Tuesday mornings, the people that come in and set up the laundry and the bedding and whatever, and about $500 to feed the group.
There you go.
So, and that is all donated from other churches in the community, other groups in the community, just individual people who bring food. So yeah, and we are just so fortunate that we live in this kind of community, and you know that we're able to do this to help somebody.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. So Claire and Ryan, any questions you have, or any thoughts you want to share, or anything you heard in there that that caught your attention? Go ahead, Ryan. You don't have to raise your hand. You can just go.
I got a question here. What is the minimum age you can volunteer? Like, what age can you start?
Well, and so then, yeah, that's good. Yeah. And so there isn't, depending on what you do. So at 16, you can jump in and begin to, when we are back on site. But as we're also finding that because of the pandemic, there are new opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, just one of the roles that we'll have to fill when we next open as a shelter is the people who come in at like 4 o'clock on Monday afternoon and set up the site. So as Marilyn and Dave mentioned, you have to put out towels, and we typically lay out the pads in the women's room and everything. And we've had a couple families that have done that in the past. So as we resume, I think, you know, while there still will be this rule of not having you on the site while the guests are there, if you're less than 16, there are opportunities for people of all ages. So.
Yeah.
And
you know, too, think about this one. We have laundry for 60 to 65 guests every Monday night. Each guest gets 2 sheets, a blanket, pillowcase, and towels. That is a lot of laundry. And one of the hotels in the area, I'm not sure, Mike, is it one of the hotels that the guests are at now that do the laundry?
It's not one of those. So.
Okay. A hotel in Arlington Heights now does our laundry for us. They come every Tuesday, pick it up. And it was They would even fold all the sheets and towels in that. When the hotel had their staff meeting, while they were having their staff meeting, they would fold the laundry, and then we would get it back. But think about doing laundry for 60 to 65 people every Monday. It's unbelievable.
So when we were talking about it earlier, I was thinking, wait, I think this group is, but this is the first group of middle schoolers that didn't get to have that experience. Faithwalk students got to help fold when we were in that transition between when the hospital stopped folding and we were trying to find the hotel. So this group doesn't know what it's like to fold the bedding for 60.
For 60 people, yeah, not fun. But
Good experience for me too.
It's just those things that you don't even think about that are part of this. What did we always say? It takes a village to run a PADS program. It really does. It does. And it's a lot of fun.
I apologize. I have to drop off. So
thanks, Mike. Any last words?
No, but I've said more than I can think of. So good luck, Ryan and Clara, on your journey, and I appreciated spending the time with you. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Mike.
Take care.
Mike, good to see you.
Take care, Marilyn.
Okay, and you guys too, anytime that you're interested and you want to come and talk or take a tour, let one of us know and we'll be glad to. Okay, thanks.
I do have a question for you.
Yes.
Before you go. Is there any way to volunteer now during the pandemic?
Yes, there is. We are still making lunches and we are getting things ready to deliver. You could, if you wanted to, bake cookies. If you wanted to come over one of the days and help pack the lunches and the breakfast, you could do that. David, maybe you could get Claire's name and phone number and whatever and text it to me. I will give it to Maura, who's kind of working with that right now, and she can give you a call and see. But yeah, there's a group that comes in. I think they're coming in on Monday mornings to pack, or maybe it's Sunday afternoons now, to pack the lunches and to make the lunches and pack them along with the breakfast to take to the hotels. And then sometimes for the dinners now, they're actually cooking some of the food at St. Mark and boxing it up in the styrofoam boxes. And I know they need help with that. And we would love to have you guys come in if you're available and you want to do it. That would be really great. So Claire, if you give David, well, he's got your information, and if he gets it to me, I'll pass it along and we will get in touch with you if you're interested in coming in.
All right.
It would be a big help because, as Mike said, most of the volunteers for PADS are older, and that was one of the issues that we had right in the beginning. Like, I have a husband who's compromised and a daughter-in-law right now, so I wasn't able to be there when the guests were there, and a lot of people our age were in that same position. So if we have some younger people that are going to come in and help while you can't be there when the guests are there, you can be there now doing other things. So that would be absolutely great. We'd love it. Ryan, you too. You could come in and help pack lunches if you're interested. So tell David if you are. We'd love to have you.
As we were kind of hearing.
Ryan, tag team.
There you go.
Yeah, we've been saying too, as we hear from Mike, what it's going to look like and what the need is, that we're definitely going to be there. So
I mean, we don't have any idea right now what it's going to look like in the future, but it will look probably pretty much as it is now through the first of the year, and that's probably when the change will come in. So cool. Okay, so, David, hey, I'm gone.
All right, I'll see you. Claire and Ryan, we'll just do a couple of seconds here before hold on a second. Actually, let me I'll stop the recording.